Hi, this is Campaign Club with Sam Drzymala, and I have with me Greg Scanlon, an old colleague of mine from past projects. Greg, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for coming on my program and talking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Greg, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself first, and just let everyone who's watching this know your background and what you've done.
Sure. So I am a opposition researcher by trade. And I think Sam and I met when I was at American Bridge 21st Century, which is an outside group that did opposition research, and it still continues to exist today, for the other outside groups during the presidential campaign, Senate races and House races. I think 2012 is when that started up when we were going.
That's right. Yeah, Mitt Romney. We spent a lot of time fighting Mitt Romney, but you were working on the Senate races mostly, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think that was like the Todd Aiken year and Richard
Oh
Murdoch.
yeah, we had a lot of fun with Todd Aiken that year.
Indeed, indeed. After that, I went to the Democratic Governors Association, and prior to that, I had done a few races. I was in Indiana for the Senate race in 2010, and I mostly came up in Virginia politics. I spent a lot of time in the state legislature and the state party there.
I didn't even know that. What were you doing there?
So I was still in research at that point. A guy named Alan Rieger, who's a great consultant, kind of took me under his wing early after I had gotten out of college and worked a couple races. And started getting into, after you do field organizing a little bit, sometimes you want to stick with that. Sometimes you want to kind of specialize in a particular niche. And that's what I kind of headed towards, and was fortunate enough to have a good mentor to get me into it. And then I started doing that more specifically in Virginia.
Cool. And so speaking of that period of your life, you wrote a piece on Medium last week I think it was sort of targeted at young campaigners, maybe coming off their first or second race. Telling them about giving some advice, some free advice on what to do with themselves now. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you were writing about?
Sure. Yeah, I think that there's kind of a general mentality in politics that there's this gravitational center in DC, and you kind of have to lean towards that and get towards that. And once you get there, you kind of see everything as a ladder, and every kind of job you take has to be a step further up this rung.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage folks to look at it not quite that linearly. And there's a lot of opportunities, I think, outside to gain a lot of leadership experience quickly, too, because I think people forget that math is kind of on your side if you go to a state capitol or something like that, where you can really take ownership over an issue, rather than in DC, where you've really got to wait a long time and kind of have things go your way and know the right people in order to get a senior leadership post at one of these very few committees that kind of narrows the higher you go, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely did that. I fell into that trap. I right as soon as I graduated college, I immediately just took off like a rocket for DC, and luckily I had some good people in DC tell me early in that process, go back out and do some races, because you really prove yourself in the field as a young political professional.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, and you can have really tangible impacts at the state level, too. That's where a lot of the fights are happening right now, whether it's with voting rights, reproductive rights, or environmental fights. I mean, states tend to pass more laws than Congress does right now, and you can, stop, amend, or pass your own laws if you're working in those places, and that's really important for people to realize.
Yeah, and especially since there are so few jobs in DC for Democrats right now. I mean, it's going to be it's kind of a famine right now. All the market is saturated. All the old Obama people are leaving the White House, and we have smaller minorities in Congress, so there are going to be fewer quote good jobs available in DC right now for people who want to climb that ladder.
Right. I didn't want to be too negative about it, but yeah, it does get a little Hunger Games after the campaign when people are duking it out for these spots.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like one important thing that I feel like what I liked about your piece was that you were really you were positive about it, and it just because a lot of other people are tying their egos up in what the title is after their name, does not mean that you have to go that route too. That especially when you're young, you should just be going after your passion, whatever is motivating you, because that's what's going to sustain you over the long course of your career, is doing things you care about.
Definitely, yeah. I think good career advice for politics is no different from good career advice, period, where you should kind of consider what quality of life you want, what you want your daily workload to look like, what you want to be doing, what time you want to get home, and kind of aim towards that with your general career.
Yeah, so another segue here, another excellent segue. Tell me a little bit about research, which is the career niche that you found yourself in. I didn't, until I worked at American Bridge with you, I really didn't understand exactly how powerful research was. I knew that opposition research was an important thing that people used on campaigns, especially to attack their enemies, but I really didn't understand how central it is to victory. If you want to talk a little bit about that, I'd love to hear from you as a professional about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that, research and researchers very intentionally try to kind of cloak it in this mystique of the dark arts, which I think certainly helps for marketing purposes. But I always encourage people not to think of it as some kind of like heavy weaponry that's going to destroy your opponent and win a campaign alone. Good research is really more about knowing yourself, knowing your opponent, having a lot of material ready to go for different situations. So it kind of guides and helps and improves your communications overall, because it's got to really be directed towards the messaging overall. So it's going to be used in your earned media and your paid media to kind of guide exactly how you're going to hit your opponent, hopefully expose their vulnerabilities, and protect yourself, ideally, because self-research is very important too. So you've got to know what's coming and how to respond to it quickly, because half the battle sometimes is how you respond to something that inevitably is going to come out.
Yeah, actually, I want to talk a little bit more about that. But first, can you define two terms for people who may not know them, earned media and paid media?
Sure. So earned media is essentially anything you get in the press, whether it's TV news or newspapers or even online sometimes, that somebody else is writing about your campaign, that either you've pushed out that story or something like along those lines. Whereas paid media is anything from mail or TV or anything that you're paying for to put on the air or in front of a voter. So
like a TV ad that you'd film would be paid media.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. And so going back to what you were saying before, and about self-research. So I think that it's interesting that a lot of the candidates that I've seen who seem very promising, they end up taken down because they didn't prepare incredibly well for what's coming, and sometimes they even play into their own problems because they may try to say something positive about themselves or draw contrast with their opponent that somehow intersect with a problem that they have in their record in their past. Have you ever seen that happen before? And how do you prevent that from happening? Like a lot of the time, I imagine it's difficult to convince candidates even that they should be doing this and thinking about this.
Definitely. I mean, the types of folks that run for office tend to have fairly healthy egos, just naturally. So I think that, it's an important first step to let them know that, here's where they're coming. Let's take a look. You need somebody on the outside that doesn't necessarily know you that well, that's going to be able to tell you straight exactly what the issues might be that you're going to be facing. And I think that you'll see this. I've noticed a lot with business types, especially. Mitt Romney kind of fell into this trap too, where they get very personally offended when you question their business acumen and anything their business might have done or like that. And they fall into this trap of getting so into defending everything that comes along instead of staying on their own message, that they kind of get stuck in this whirlpool that they're unable to get out of. So I think it's very important not only to know what's coming, but to keep you on track overall, because otherwise you're going to get lost in the weeds of all these daily fights.
So I think that's a very good point. I also, as a counterpoint, I feel like Donald Trump has the same problem, and yet it didn't sink him. So why do you think that it didn't get to him? Even though he was even more sensitive to this stuff. I mean, he's a total whiner. He gets upset about anything that you say about anything, even no matter how small. So why didn't that sink his candidacy? Was it because the Clinton team didn't go after it aggressively enough, and were they not persistent enough, or is it because he was able to deflect and distract and go to a different bring up a new topic and pivot?
I mean, that's, a good question, and I don't want to Monday morning quarterback anybody on the Clinton camp, because I think that the research material against Trump was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it was everywhere. It was being reported. I think it was just one of those years, and he was speaking to an audience, and he really made his name as this unapologetic, I'm going to say whatever, it doesn't matter, guy, and that's how he became a celebrity. And he was like a realtor sales guy and kind of a fast-talking guy who was unapologetically going to say whatever he wanted, and that goes back to The Apprentice and everything. And I think the people that were rooting for him loved that about him, and no matter what came out, he openly said, I could shoot somebody on the street and I wouldn't voters.
I remember when he said that. Yeah, he bragged that he can shoot anybody and it wouldn't matter.
So I think he very much took that approach to heart, and perhaps if the focus had been more on something, like the people that he had hurt instead of him personally, maybe that would have been a direction to go. I don't know. But, it's one of those timeless questions that I'm sure everybody's going to have an answer to based on their personal issues with whatever happened this year.
Yeah, for sure. So transitioning again, what do you think is going to be the most important? What do you think the keys are to getting ourselves out of the hole that we're in currently? We had 8 years of Obama. We accomplished some really important things, but a lot of that's going to be erased. And for a long time, when Obama hasn't been on the ballot, it's not like campaigns were going great for us during the Obama years when he wasn't on the ballot. So this is not exactly new for us. It's just sort of the nadir of a long, slow slide of our campaigns, of any campaign that we've run without Obama since Bill Clinton, basically.
Right.
So what do you think we need to do?
I think we've got to build a bench, as I mentioned in my piece. And I think that, everybody kind of focuses on the candidate side of that, but it's very important for those people to have staffers as well. So that's what, again, the reasons I wanted to encourage people to go out there and find, these county executives and these city council people and mayors and state legislators and school board members that want to run for those positions, because it's a long process. And it's an important process, and that's where all these people that are going to be running the country in a few years are going to be living. People forget that Barack Obama was an Illinois senator like 4 years, I think, before he got inaugurated.
Yeah.
So, this is important stuff, and you've got to go find them and you've got to help them out. And I think that, the more that we can encourage people to get that kind of experience, the more they're going to be well equipped down the road. I hope we have a huge, messy primary in 2020, and I hope that all sorts of people run, and I hope that we all get sick of it because it's just going on and on and on, because that's what happened to Republicans this year. And what ends up happening is you've got somebody that's kind of ready for anything when they become the nominee at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I want to see so many candidates, and I want the more flowers that bloom, the more chance that there is that somebody that we're going to get a star that just rockets out of nowhere, and we're going to find someone who's going to be the right messenger with the right message for the right time. So I'm totally with you there. What else are you seeing right now? That's interesting to you. What do you think of how we're going to fight against Trump? What do we need to do to fight back against him?
Well, hopefully, that we kind of have a similar situation to what we had around 2006 when Bush started running into increasing trouble and kind of went down to the polls, and we had some opportunities to take advantage of it. I think that, we've got to figure there is kind of a learning curve, I think, with any new president about, how much are you just going to totally oppose everything? Or you're going to try to box him in and get him to fight his own people or something? And, I think we're going to have a lot of issues with congressional leadership figuring that out. But I'm reasonably hopeful, based on his cabinet selection so far, that he is going to go in a unfortunate direction that turns folks against him.
It's super interesting, right? I think he personally would rather just be popular. I think that's what he wants. I think he wants to be popular, and so when things happen, I doubt that anyone. I'm not sure how big this is going to be, but what if if he gets Jeff Sessions through to be his AG, and Sessions is super, super, super anti marijuana legalization? There are a lot of the bros who supported the Reddit bros who supported Trump online are probably they would not assume that Trump is going to be all about blocking their pot, and I just think that there are a lot of traps for him, and I wonder how he's going to navigate that stuff. If he's just going to top down Jeff Sessions and say, hey, don't mess with this, because a lot of the stuff he's done so far has been just trying to get these big PR moments for himself to make himself more popular as he goes into his inauguration. And I think that he's been pretty successful thus far. Would you disagree?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell before he's actually pulling the levers and in office. Right. So I think, there's been a lot of focus on how much the media should cover his tweets at this point compared to his appointments. I think that's going to be a learning curve as well. I think that, I mean, you're right. I think ultimately an angry electorate is one that votes. So if he is able to alienate either the marijuana community, as you mentioned, or, the folks, I mean, there are a lot of people in middle America that lost their homes and were very attracted to him attacking big banks and finance.
That's right.
That his moves towards appointing a lot of Goldman Sachs folks are going to alienate that crowd that specifically voted for that reason. Yeah,
that's the big one. I mean, I mentioned the marijuana thing because it was something that I was reading about this morning. But you're totally right. That is the big one. It's totally anathema to everything that he said on the campaign, and you've already seen him have to react. Like early on in his transition, like I think it was like the second week, he had this situation where there was a lot of infighting. I mean, there's still a lot of infighting, but that was becoming the main story about his transition, and he had to like come in and nip it in the bud himself. So it's not like he doesn't react to threats, which I think is a good sign for us as people who are trying to knock him off his game, because if he does react, that means that he does sense a weakness in himself that he has to defend, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you want it to get kind of bad for people to vote, but you don't want it to get so bad that the world is destroyed. So I think we're
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think the Democrats are going to have to choose how bad they're going to, are they going to oppose everything, and I'm sure he'll try lots of tricks to try to get, try to make the Democrats look bad for opposing him. So we'll
absolutely,
I guess. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I mean, thank you for having me, and I just want to encourage everybody to get out there. And I know it's tricky right now in the doldrums of November and December as things wind down and people get ready for 2017. But the night is darkest just before the dawn.
Yeah, I've been feeling slightly more energized, seeing a lot of the really cool grassroots stuff, anti-Trump stuff that's bubbling up. So I think that there is always hope. And I want to say that before we sign off to anybody, if you have questions that came up when you're watching this, I put both Greg's and my Twitter handles in the description, and feel free to tweet at us. And if we see it, we will write back to you and answer your questions as young up and coming politicos. All right, thanks, Greg. Appreciate you coming on with me, and it's great to talk to you.
Absolutely, Sam. Have a good one.
Okay.